Hello there, this is Out Motorsports. My name is Jake, and this is the 2021 Jeep Gladiator. Personally, I am so excited to have one of these to test for the week, and I will tell you why. I am a convertible person through and through. My first car was a Mazda Miata, and I need a pickup truck because I have to have something that will pull my big enclosed trailer. When Jeep introduced this Gladiator pickup truck, it was in theory something that could do it all. It's a convertible pickup truck, and it has a fairly high tow rating for being in the mid-size category. If you get it properly equipped, you can tow up to 7,650 pounds according to Jeep. Now, I've been asking Jeep for one of these since they came out, and the problem is a lot of these Gladiators are not actually equipped to tow more than about 4,000 pounds. So they finally got one here in the DC area that can pull a little bit more weight than that. It's enough to try out towing with my big trailer and do a proper towing test. So that's what we're gonna do today. Now, before we get into this video, we really appreciate all the support so far, but if you like what we're up to, please take a second, subscribe to the channel before we get into this video. Most of the people watching these videos aren't subscribed, and we'd love to have you coming back for more videos. And the more subscribers we have, the more cool cars and trucks we will get to review for you. So with that, let's get started. Like I said, this is the Jeep Gladiator. This is not brand new for 2021, but this is a 2021 model year. Now, the exciting thing about this Gladiator in particular that is newer than when they first came out is that this finally has the EcoDiesel 3-liter V6 turbo diesel engine in this particular Gladiator. If you go with the base engine, that is a 3.6-liter Pentastar V6, and it's a fine engine. It is not necessarily the one that fits the character of this truck 100%. That is how you're gonna get your max tow rating of 7,650. Jeep does a lot of confusing things with their trim levels as pertains to towing with this truck. The way you're gonna get the most towing ability is with that V6 in the Sport or Sport S trim levels with the max tow package. Now, this one being a diesel, it actually doesn't have the highest tow rating. It will tow up to 6,500 pounds. This trim level is the Overland, which is kind of the luxury trim level of the Gladiator lineup. You can also get this EcoDiesel on the Rubicon, where it can tow about 6,000 pounds, but Rubicon has different suspension and some other options going on, so you do lose a little bit of tow capacity as a result. Now, with the Overland, like I said, this one is like fully optioned. It's got every little thing ticked off on the options list, every package you can get, and the MSRP of this thing comes in right around $60,000, which is quite a bit. It's worth keeping in mind, though, that you can get a Gladiator diesel Overland for about $10,000 less if you're careful with your options choices. The diesel adds about $4,000 to the price. Some people will say it adds $6 grand, but that's because it requires you get the automatic transmission over the standard manual. You cannot get a manual transmission with the diesel. You can get it with the Pentastar, but if you want that maximum tow rating, you have to get the automatic. So that's why I'm saying it's only a $4,000 price difference. Now, this EcoDiesel is the same diesel that you will find in the Jeep Grand Cherokee, other FCA, now Stellantis products like the Ram 1500 EcoDiesel, which we took a look at middle of last year. In Jeep Gladiator spec, it makes 260 horsepower and it makes 442 pound-feet of torque, and it makes that torque starting at 1,400 RPM, and it carries that little wave of torque all the way up to about 2,800 RPM. So it's a nice low revving engine, and it really feels a little quicker than it should be given it's only 260 horsepower. Now, the other thing that is worth mentioning with the Gladiator as pertains to towing is that when you pick this diesel engine, you lose payload. The diesel is heavier than the Pentastar by a few hundred pounds, and all the accessories that go on it and supporting gear actually lose more or less 400 pounds or more of payload versus a Pentastar Gladiator. So again, if you're looking for the most tow capacity, the diesel's actually not the right one to get, and that's unfortunate because this one has all the torque. I've driven Gladiators that have the Pentastar. Like I said, it's a totally fine engine. It makes similar horsepower to this. This one is 260, the Pentastar is somewhere around 260, 280. But you really have to rev the Pentastar to make all that power. It's a gas-powered engine, it's a passenger car engine more than a truck engine, and it doesn't feel like it would be the best thing for towing. Like I said, I haven't towed anything with a Pentastar Gladiator, so can't really say much. The diesel does have some compromises, namely with payload and also with overall towing ability. Now, as far as what the Gladiator is, this is basically a four-door Jeep Wrangler that they stretched and made into a pickup truck. Now, when I say they stretched it, they didn't just add length behind the rear doors, they actually stretched the wheelbase by 19 inches compared to a 4-door Wrangler. So this wheelbase of this Gladiator is 137 inches long. That puts it almost in spitting distance of a half-ton truck. Now, that should do really good things for stability. A Wrangler is only rated at most to tow 3,500 pounds, and I personally wouldn't even do that given how soft the Wrangler is. Now, the Gladiator does have its own suspension setup, but some of the pieces in the rear of the Gladiator are actually borrowed from the Ram 1500. Both upper and lower control arms are straight from the Ram 1500, as is the track bar. And the track bar is what connects the body of the vehicle to the axle, and that makes sure the axle only moves in a certain direction and keeps the whole thing a little more stable. So having an upgraded track bar in the rear for the extra towing load should, in theory, help with how this thing behaves. Now, I say should because when I mentioned that this was coming for the week and I was super excited to tow with it, some people referred me to a Motor Trend article in which they towed a 23-foot Airstream camper behind two different Gladiators. One was a diesel like this and one was a Mojave. And the Mojave is only rated to pull about 4,000 pounds. But they put the camper behind one like this, which was rated to pull more weight and should be more properly set up. And they said it was a very, very scary towing experience. I'm really hoping that it's not a scary towing experience from a selfish personal level because, like I said, this truck is more or less everything I really want, and I hope it works out. So here's the deal. My trailer is currently empty because my race car is at the shop a few hours away from here, getting work done before we kick off the 2021 racing season. So I'm gonna first pull my 20-foot enclosed aluminum trailer empty with just tools and whatever spare parts I've got in there. And then we're gonna take it over to my friend Taylor's house, who's been working on this E21 BMW that you've seen on the channel. And we're gonna put the E21 in the back of the trailer. And we'll see how the Gladiator does, both loaded up and unloaded. Now, it's also important to note that Jeep does offer a trailer brake controller as part of your options list on the Gladiator. This particular Gladiator doesn't have it. I don't know if you can't get it yet or it's just not equipped, even though this has every other option on the list. But regardless, I do have a solution for that. I've used it with other tow vehicles that I've tested, and that comes in the form of the Tekonsha Prodigy RF. It is a wireless trailer brake controller that plugs in line between the tow vehicle and the trailer and is controlled by a remote that plugs into your cigarette lighter outlet. So don't have to mess with any wiring here, but we will have proper trailer brakes. The other thing that I'm gonna do once we have the car inside the trailer, which Motor Trend didn't do, is I'm gonna use a weight distributing hitch. And that will help take some of the tongue weight off the back axle of the Gladiator and send it forward to the front axle. Speaking of axles, it's worth mentioning every Gladiator has Dana 44 axles. I know very little about axles, but Dana 44s are the bigger, beefier, stronger axles compared to the lower number Dana axles that you can get on some lower spec Wranglers that aren't Rubicons. So every Gladiator will have Dana 44s. It's also worth mentioning that the gearing on those Dana 44s is 373. On the Gladiator Sport S and Sport, the Pentastar, and that max tow package, you actually get a different axle rating. You get 410s if you get that max tow package. That'll help with off-the-line acceleration, and frankly, given the Pentastar needing to rev a little bit more, it'll absolutely help the Pentastar. The diesel has enough torque that I think it'll offset it, so we'll see how that handles. It's also important to note here, for all that Jeep says about towing with one of these, there's no dedicated tow haul mode with anything on the Gladiator. You just put the transmission in drive and off you go. So let's hook up to my trailer and we'll drag it around empty on the way to Taylor's house, and then we'll load up the BMW and see how it is with a little more weight inside. Now, I should mention that it's a pretty windy day. We're supposed to get snow tomorrow, and the weather, you know, the day before always gets a little windy, a little breezy. It's 30 degrees out. I've checked tire pressures, so everything is solid from a tire pressure perspective, but yeah, this is gonna be kind of the ultimate test for this Gladiator for the sake of trailer control, sway control, you know, how it behaves at highway speed with wind. There's a lot of tow vehicles that can be really, really good on a perfect clear day, and that's wonderful, but a lot of times if you're towing something, you don't get a perfect clear day. You get crappy weather, you You get a lot of wind, rain, snow, whatever, and you need to have good control of what's behind you, because otherwise it doesn't matter how good it is on a clear, dry, sunny day. If you're driving home late at night and it's super windy and you can't control this thing and keep it in a lane, you're gonna have some problems. So I feel pretty good so far. We're doing 60, 62 miles an hour, and even with it being a windy day, this is doing all right unloaded. And the other thing worth mentioning, I'm sure some of you are asking, well, this thing has the diesel, it's got all this torque, 442 foot-pounds. Why is this one not the one that can tow as much? If you read up on the SAE tow rating test, this is the Society of Automotive Engineers, and it is a standardized test that's been developed over the past handful of years to ensure that every tow rating for every vehicle with a hitch is actually standardized. In the past, many, many years ago, the tow ratings were just whatever the manufacturer decided they were. So having a standardized test is really helpful, but it's actually kind of a torture test, because they do this test out west, and it's some form of going fairly quickly up a very steep grade in the summertime in the desert with the air conditioning blasting for a certain number of miles. It really puts strain on all of the vehicle's systems, especially the cooling system. And the challenge with the Gladiator is that Jeep wanted to keep that 7-slot grille that everyone knows a Jeep to have. The problem is with the turbo diesel, there's also an intercooler right by the radiator, and Jeep just couldn't shove enough air through the 7-slot grille to keep it cool if they were pulling more than a certain amount of weight and doing that SAE test. So even with the wider slots in the grille, if you notice, every Gladiator's grille, the slots are wider than that of the same year Wranglers. Take a look if you ever see them next to each other. But even with extra width of the slats, they just couldn't get enough air through there, and I suspect if you're trying to pass that SAE test with the maximum load that the gas Gladiator can handle, 7650, it probably started overheating or otherwise behaving sort of poorly, and they decided they couldn't safely, reliably claim you can tow that much weight in all scenarios and not overheat the truck or have some other issues. You know, keep in mind, Jeep doesn't want to be paying out a bunch of warranty claims because they told you could tow something super heavy and actually you can't in certain instances. The other items that the max tow package Gladiators get that this one doesn't have are wider track axles. Like I said, all of the axles are a Dana 44, but you get a wider track axle if you get the max tow package. You also get a heavier duty alternator, which will help because you've got more weight, more load on the engine, and also, you know, if you're charging a trailer battery or something with the case of an enclosed trailer, you've got the heavier duty alternator. You do get track lock, which is Jeep's version of a limited slip differential. This Gladiator does have it. You can spec it on a lot of other Gladiators, but the max tow package will give you that by default, but that's not exclusive to the max tow. The other thing that is an upgrade on max tow on those V6 Pentastar Sport S and Sport models with max tow is bigger brakes. They actually upgrade the brakes, bigger rotors. I don't know if they do bigger calipers, but either way, you get more stopping force, more stopping area for the brake pads to use, and that will help, obviously, if you're pulling heavier weight, trying to slow it down, going, you know, down a mountain or something. Let's get over to Taylor's. We'll throw the BMW in the back and see how this behaves with a couple thousand more pounds back there. All right, so now we've got Taylor's E21, which is a 1983 BMW 320i. It does not weigh as much as what I would normally have in the back of this trailer, which is my 1997 BMW M3. There's about a 400-pound weight difference, give or take. And on the one hand, you do notice that. On the other hand, we're definitely within this truck's rated weight. I think if we had my newer M3 back there, we'd be right up at 6,500 pounds for what's behind us. So as far as how this Gladiator is towing the enclosed trailer with all that weight behind it, I'm pretty happy with it. I have to say the worst thing are the mirrors. I mentioned it earlier, but they're tiny mirrors because they're from the Wrangler, and they're small because when you're off-roading, you don't want big giant mirrors to whack on everything that you're trying to scoot past. The problem is, in the real world on paved roads, you absolutely want bigger mirrors because, especially with a trailer, you really can't see a whole lot. So as far as stability at higher speeds, 55, 65 miles an hour, I think it's okay. I'm not quite sure what Motor Trend was on about with the camper, unless the weight distribution of the camper was a little goofy, or maybe they didn't have that weight distribution hitch like they claim they didn't have. Now with the acceleration here, this is only 260 horsepower, but it is all that torque. It's 442 foot-pounds, and it moves out pretty well. I had the same engine in a Ram 1500 Limited over the summer last year. With the Gladiator weighing less than that Ram 1500, this whole drivetrain feels a little more sprightly. It's still not fast. It's all tuned for torque. And like I said, that torque band runs from way down low at like 1400 or 1500 RPM up to about 2800. And once you get out of that, you can tell that, you know, she's trying, but there's just not much there to give. It's only 260 horsepower. You know, you're not going to win a drag race, but it works just fine. And as far as stability is concerned, 55, 60, 65, it's okay. Like I said, this is a windy day. This is not the worst conditions you'd have for wind, but it's certainly not a perfect day. And we're doing just fine. I'm not really concerned right now. I don't know if I would be one of those people who tows at 75 or 80 with a Gladiator, with a trailer of this size behind me. Frankly, I don't think towing at 75 plus is the safest thing in the world anyway. Most trailer tires aren't rated for that, and you're kind of playing with fire if you try it. But at 60, 65, you're doing just fine. This feels pretty good. I do not know if I would really want to pull a bigger trailer than this. The trailer that I have is a 20-foot box, and then it's got this V-nose on the front, which helps with aerodynamics. That's about 3 or 4 feet, and then you've got a few more feet for the trailer tongue at the very front. So altogether, nose to tail, it's about 27 feet long, and a majority of that is a big box. It's a big sail in the wind. And you know, you are going to have more movement with this when you're passing an 18-wheeler or anything else that kind of pushes the air on either side of the truck. And if you've got a bigger trailer that's a big box, it's just going to exaggerate that effect. So there's a lot to think about with towing an enclosed trailer or a camper. And this is one of those where, you know, just because you can weight-wise doesn't mean you should from an aerodynamic standpoint. I think a lot of people forget that. The one thing that I was really concerned about with towing with this Gladiator was the steering, because the steering on all of the Gladiators feels just like the steering on a Wrangler. If you've driven a Wrangler of this, you know, current generation in the last couple years, you'll know what the steering feels like, and that's to say it's really loose on center. It's not super fun. If you've got a two-door Wrangler in particular, those are so short that it's really unfun on the highway on a windy day with a two-door Wrangler. It's just kind of loose, and to me feels a little bit all over the place. I think the longer wheelbase of the Gladiator helps a lot with that. There is some, you know, on-center play here, but it's not that bad, and I certainly feel like everything is controlled right now. I'm not, you know, making constant adjustments just to go straight. So that is a good thing. That makes me pretty happy. Now, while we were out filming B-roll, I did have one instance where the people in front of me, of course, welcome to DC, stopped kind of short. I had to really get on the brakes, and like I said, this truck does not have the max tow package. That only comes on the Sport and Sport S with the Pentastar V6. But even though I don't have those bigger brakes, I was still able to stop the rig from about 50, 55 miles an hour. And obviously I do have trailer brakes through that Prodigy RF, but in any case, I was able to stop the whole thing pretty confidently. Did get a little bit of lockup from the trailer tires because you don't have ABS on the trailer, but the truck ABS kicked on and slowed us all down, and it was really a non-event, which is a good thing. You want that kind of control, and when you brake really heavy, it sends a lot of weight to the front axle, so you want to be able to have both braking control and stability in your steering. And I was able to keep the whole thing straight. It was not cause for concern. Felt pretty good. So. All right, and that's it for this review of the 2021 Jeep Gladiator EcoDiesel. Thank you so much for coming along on this towing test today. As always, if you like what we're up to, please take a second and subscribe to the channel, like the video, give us a follow on Facebook and Instagram, and check us out at outmotorsports.com. We have a whole member community if you're a part of the LGBT community and also a big automotive enthusiast, or if you're just an ally or advocate to the community and want to connect with similar-minded folks. We would love to have you join us in either case. Outmotorsports.com, join our membership program, or take a look at the written review for this 2021 Gladiator EcoDiesel. Until next time, please stay safe, be well, and we'll see you soon.